Hello everyone, my name's Bridgette and welcome to a very special edition of Another Other. In this episode we are aiming to explore the idea of home and what that means to people, particularly for people who perhaps have moved away from home and are not living in their place of birth. This particular podcast is in collaboration with Welcome Presents. Welcome Presents is a community project that was founded in 2016. It includes the Welcome Kitchen, which is a group of refugee chefs and their friends, and the Welcome Cinema, which was held monthly at Amnesty International before the dreaded COVID disrupted everybody's plans. This project is about bringing together refugees, asylum seekers, and the general public through the shared love of food, film, and friendship. They are currently raising money to keep the project going during lockdown. This includes money for a food truck so that they can continue to share the wonderful food cooked by the Welcome Kitchen. So if you are interested in donating to that, it would be much appreciated, and the details will be in the show notes. On to today's show. We have a very, very special guest with us today. This person is someone I deeply admire, and he's also somebody that I am privileged enough to call a friend. The amazing Inua Ellams. This man is a poet, a playwright, a graphic artist, a designer, a performer. That's not even triple threat. I don't know what that is. We're going to call it blessed and highly favoured. He's performed his amazing work all over the UK, including Glastonbury Festival, the Barbican, the Royal Albert Hall, and he completed 2 sold-out runs at the National Theatre with his incredible show, The Barbershop Chronicles. Inua has just completed his first full poetry collection entitled The Actual, which you can purchase now. I have got my copy and I'm giving it a 5-star review and I haven't even opened the book. Do yourself a favour and go out and purchase that book. So today we're just going to be talking about your journey from Nigeria to London via Dublin, for those of you who don't know. And yeah, can we just talk a little bit about your background, your childhood, how you came to be?
Yeah, we can talk all of those. This is new for me, by the way. I haven't been able to do this before.
I thought you meant your trousers.
I've been doing little bits of yoga and flexibility routines, which means that I can do this. I've never been able to touch my toes, so that's the high point. But this is entirely new for me. I'm just showing off.
I don't even know if we're getting this. I think we're cutting
really
your hair.
basic though. Oh, really? Okay, well, my legs are crossed. This is the
Just
thing.
so you know, his legs are crossed. I can.
Very
confirm.
basics, but yeah. Okay, cool.
I love that you have to get that in there.
I'm proud of myself.
You should be. Apart from yoga.
Yes.
Yeah, let's just go back. So, for those of you who don't know, Inua is not from the UK.
No, so... And the thing is really interesting, you know, when people stop you because of the color of your skin and ask you where you from. Like, normally, I guess Black British people get irate, and I completely get why they get irate, but I sort of get irate on behalf of them, even though I know that I'm actually from here. So it's like a double bluff, and usually I just say London and just end the conversation there. But when I say where you from, and then reluctantly I say something like planet Jupiter, and just keep it moving. But yes, I'm not from here. I wasn't born in England. I was born in Jos, which is in northern Nigeria, and then I moved down to Lagos for a little bit, then moved to London in 1996, then moved to Ireland in Dublin in 1999, then returned in 2002, and I've lived here ever since. So I'm a foreigner, a nomad, a traveler. Yeah.
Amazing. How old were you when you left Nigeria?
I was 12 years old. I had just completed the second year of secondary school because I was one of those clever bastards that skipped a couple of years in primary school. And and I left and came here, and I went to Holland Park in London.
I know Holland Park. So do you remember much about from the ages of 0 to 12 in Nigeria, what that was like?
You know how memory and the brain works. When you remember something, you actually remember it the last time you remember it, not the memory itself. So there's a lot that I remember, which means there's a lot that I fabricated and mixed with reality. So short answer is yes and no. Yes, I remember a whole bunch of things, 50% of which I made up. Yeah.
Fair. Okay. Do you feel like your childhood was happy or?
Yeah, I guess. My father, in Lagos, we were, our neighbor was the princess of Zululand. And I don't know, there were probably
Okay.
loads of princesses, but she was one. And whenever she traveled, she'd bring gifts back for us because we were her neighbors. I think the penultimate time I saw her just before I left, she bought a whole trunk of toys and they were all stolen at the Nigerian airport, which is the kind of thing that happens in Nigerian airports, to be honest. But yeah, it was idyllic. It was gorgeous for the most part. My father was a manager of a Coca-Cola bottling plant, which meant that I kind of grew up drinking a whole bunch of fizzy drinks, swimming pools of that and ice cream, and we became a middle class Nigerian family, which meant that we could take holidays. We could, yeah, it was largely good.
So does that mean that you got to travel?
Yeah. I got to
Wow.
travel quite a bit. I visited London 2 or 3 times before we actually settled here, and we used to travel right across Nigeria as well. And my father was into shipping, which means that he was always traveling globally, trying to work out deals. He was quite the nomad. I think I may have visited more countries than he did now, which is quite a thing to say because he kind of went everywhere. But yeah, we traveled a bit. We traveled a bit as a family.
That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
So I was actually going to ask you what your first impressions of the UK were, but you'd already visited the UK before
Yeah,
you lived
but
here.
when I first came, the penultimate time I came here, there was this song that had just come out. I'm gonna try and sing it to you. It's really bad. The lyrics are something like, "I've got a secret. I've got a secret.
I know it.
I've got
The
a key
key
to
to
another
another
way." Yeah, exactly. So I remember listening to that and loving the song. Because when I got back to Nigeria, I just started sulking. I think I was mourning losing London, and that song I just played it in loop, crying into my pillow. And then I think the following year, my dad said, "Oh yeah, no, I think maybe 2 years later, said we have to move to London." So I was ready. I was like, yes, good. London always felt like home. So when I first settled when I was a kid, I was torn up about leaving my friends, and we can come to reasons why we had to do so later.
Yeah.
But settling in London was awesome. It was a dream come true. I was running around everywhere, and we stayed with my uncle and in my uncle's flat where my older cousin lived with us, and I was so naive. He called me a wanker, and I did not know what. I was so innocent. I didn't even know what masturbation. Like that's how.
Oh, wow.
That was how new I was
Uncle really,
to Ireland.
wow.
Yeah.
You did that.
Yeah. And he gave me, and he just kind of laughed and said, "Someday you will learn." And then obviously I went to secondary school, Holland Park, and I learned very quickly. But he gave me a pair of football boots, metal spiked ones. And I was so excited that I put them on. I just went around walking through the streets of London. So I completely messed them up because you're only supposed to wear them on football pitches. But it just felt like a big adventure, a big playground to me those first few months before I started schooling in Holland Park.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And before you even went on holiday, where you lived in Nigeria, did people used to talk about London or the UK as?
Yeah, we digested a lot of British content in television in Nigeria. We had cable TV, so we watched everything from Rent a Ghost to Doctor Who to Danger Mouse and Bed Knobs and Broomsticks and Fraggle Rock, and we have Pigeon Street. Like
This is quintessential.
Yeah, classic
shit
British
here,
television. Yeah. So and also I grew up reading a whole bunch of British literature. So I think when I was 9 or 10, I was reading Dickens' Great Expectations.
Wow.
So I arrived with some knowledge of Britain. It wasn't entirely
Probably
alien to me.
more knowledge than people who actually are
Grew
born
up
here.
here,
I can
yeah.
tell you, I was not reading Dickens. Not at a super young age.
Yeah.
And just talking about reading, so your love of, I guess, literature, did that start really, really early on? Must have, if you
It
were.
started way before I left Nigeria. I just read voraciously. It's probably because my mother used to ask us to read the Bible, and I read it like a novel.
Yeah.
For me, it wasn't a holy text. It was just, oh my God, God is hardcore. Look what he's doing in the Old Testament. That shit is foul. Just reading it like a novel under the duvet with a torchlight. I never made it to Revelations. I got a bit too scared when I got there. Yeah,
potentially wise.
A lot of my foundations for reading just came from digesting religious text and moving into comic books and Dickens and so it was really fostered and encouraged by my parents. So when I came here and I could actually go to libraries and get even more books, it was a wildness for me. All I did was read.
Oh, I love that. And to be honest, I was quite similar to you. I just devoured anything that I could.
Were you born here?
I was born here, yeah. My parents are from Ghana, but I was born here. My sister wasn't though.
Yeah.
But yeah, just anything, whether it was newspaper, comic, the Bible as well. That's just the standards.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I really relate to that. I just, in terms of like your parents fostering that, how did they kind of know that was what you were into, and how did you get access to, I guess, British text, or was it translated? Sorry, I don't.
No. How did we get? I guess every time my father would travel, he would just bring books back, or we had other cousins and neighbors who had stuff. I was also reading like Jeffrey Archer novels when I was 9 or 10. I think my father just had lots of things. And he never told me don't read that. So if there was a book, I just pick it up and read it. And he never sort of tried to incubate or limit my access to literature. It was there. He enjoyed it. So he just assumed that we would as well.
It's really, really amazing. I was just going to ask, when you first went to London, I don't know what it was like. I'm just thinking of what things are like in Ghana when we travel over and you're like, you've come from overseas. Was there like a big hoopla when you went back to Nigeria from going to London the first couple of times on holiday? Or did you live in a place where people travelled a lot?
So where we lived in Lagos in our final years was sort of affluent. Okay. So there were lots of middle class people who traveled everywhere, so it wasn't a big deal. But even then, we weren't super wealthy. So all the other kids on my street had Street Fighters, Sega Mega Drives, and Nintendo N64s. I didn't have any of those. We didn't even have a bicycle. I had to borrow my neighbor's bicycle and teach myself how to ride. So even though we were affluent, we weren't the richest, but traveling definitely wasn't too big a thing. Everyone flew.
Amazing. What was your initial overall impression of London when you first got? Maybe not so much when you went on holiday, but when I first settled
here. It was around summer we came, so it was warm.
That's a lie. That's putting a false.
It was warmer than we expected.
Yeah,
I'll put it that way. And we arrived in 1996, and London back then was very, very different.
Yeah,
kids could still just go on adventures and get lost without their parents freaking out. Mobile phones weren't a big thing there, so there wasn't an issue about being constant communication. So, and I think realizing that there was functional transport was one thing, very different in Lagos. All the streets were kind of paved. The underground was a whole network. It was new to me, and that kids could just go on this free of charge on the way to school, and there was free travel at the time. It felt like the beginning of something incredible. It was around the time that I started reading Terry Pratchett's novels.
Same. Discworld, yeah.
Discworld, all the Discworld novels, yeah. And because of his very British humor, it taught me a lot about Britishness. And even though it was set in this fantasy world, it's all wild, it's ridiculous, it's over the top. I could understand British sensibility through him. And I think it was the first time I read a book besides the Bible that just had no pictures at all, and it was wild. Even some of the Charles Dickens had little illustrations in it, but this was just solid, hardcore adventure, and it was over. But it was the first book I read that made me laugh out loud. And I remember thinking, oh my God, are British people like this?
I was just going to ask, what did you perceive Britishness to be?
A sort of witty, dry kind of humor, and this is benefit of hindsight now. We can tell, it's very different, but also a very kind of sharp, caustic aesthetic, and this is Terry's voice. But through that, I thought, if Terry can make me laugh like this, and he's definitely the British man, maybe I can be British, because his humor matches my humor. So he rose tinted the lens through which I saw England.
Yeah, books all do that. Yeah.
Books always
Enid Blyton. It was Enid Blyton for me. I was like, oh my gosh, lashings and lashings
of everything.
Of everything in abundance.
Ginger beer, cake, everything.
Yes.
Everything.
So true. And then I was like, oh, and I was born in.
Yeah.
I read this and I was like, oh wow. I mean, I don't have any of this shit. Lashings and lashings of a lash for my mom, maybe,
yes,
but yeah. So, because you were saying that it made you felt like you could be British. Was that like something that was important to you, that you wanted to, I don't know, assimilate or?
I think just fitting in was important to me, and trying to build a sense of the community that had just left in Nigeria, trying to replicate it. So more so than Britishness. At the time, I wasn't even aware of nationhood or nationalism or nativism. I just knew I'd left Nigeria, where most of the people were black.
Yeah.
Here, most of the people are like a little bit of everything, and I just want to be part of the everything.
Yeah.
I think,
Did you find that hard?
Kids kind of rock with punches, right? Things change, and we just roll with it. So, I didn't think it was necessarily hard. I assimilated relatively quickly. I found a network of nerds and geeks and weirdos who shared similar humor to that some of them loved reading as well, listening to the same kind of music. So, and Holland Park then is different, very different to Holland Park now.
Yeah.
So it was so multicultural that Nelson Mandela came to visit Holland Park, because he could see the Rainbow Nation was trying to construct in South Africa in that school.
Wow.
So it was easy for me to sort of like settle in there. Of course, it was the first place I encountered racism. I learned what that was, etc. But generally, my classroom was incredibly ethnically diverse cultures, and so no, in fact. There was just beef between the Moroccan kids and everybody else.
Okay.
and that was it. But even there, we were friends with all the Moroccan kids. So, no, settling into Holland Park was brilliant. Perhaps if I'd gone to another school, which was less racially diverse, my London would have been very different.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. But sometimes when you come to London, you just assume that that's the whole of the UK.
Yeah.
You don't have a reference point. I was speaking to my mum about moving here, and I think she just did think that the UK was London. There was loads, she didn't know Bolton, Manchester. She just like, London, that's England.
Yeah.
Used in the same, to describe the UK, you would just say London. So I think it can be a bit of a culture shock, even more, from going from London to then, some other parts of the UK.
Of the world, yeah.
It's a bit different. I'm assuming, I know that you grew up in a middle class sort of area in Nigeria. So, and I know in Ghana that you're just taught English in all primary schools as a given. Is that the same thing? Yeah.
We, in secondary school, we weren't really being taught other indigenous Nigerian languages. So we learned a little bit of French, a little bit of Spanish and English, and that was it. And the reason why we weren't taught any Nigerian languages, and I only really discovered this when I was writing my previous play, Three Sisters, is because after the Civil War, the Nigerian government were trying to create a united Nigeria.
Yeah.
And they thought that the best way to do that is to reduce our ethnic and tribal differences. So they banned us speaking our own indigenous languages in boarding schools and in federal government colleges, and only taught us English. So, and that's the school that I went to before I left. So I only grew up learning English, a little bit of French. That was it. Yeah.
And how do you feel about that now?
I think our ethnic, the ethnic clashes that plagued Nigeria, which led up to the Civil War, are still playing out across Nigerian politics. and there's still calls for Biafra and the Igbos to leave Nigeria right now. So the government's, plaster fell off the wound because the problems persist. So it was failed,
Yeah.
and I really wish I spoke a Nigerian language, and I know I could learn one, but
Yeah.
the effort it takes, the older you get, is just so much more difficult.
Do your parents still speak with each other in?
No, they only speak Pidgin or Pidgin English at home.
Really?
But they have networks of friends who they can speak all of those other languages too.
Okay.
But they didn't have a communal language together besides English and Pidgin.
That's really interesting.
To your parents?
Yeah, so my mum only speaks Tree in English, but it was growing up, my mum only spoke Tree to my sister.
Okay.
And only English to me.
Oh,
which
wow.
It meant that I didn't pick up anything, but when I was talking to her recently, she kind of regrets it, but for her, she wanted to practice her English as well, so which is why she, and she was like, well, I'm living in England, so I need to speak English, but I think she regrets not teaching me, and now my sister actually has lost Tree, and she was born there.
Oh, wow.
And she can understand it, but she can't really speak it at all. But she did go to boarding school in Ghana, and they were very much encouraged to only speak English too.
Yeah.
It was quite strict. They were quite strict about that.
Yeah.
Just to go back to what you were talking, I mean, you mentioned politics. We can't not talk about politics, but if you don't mind, could you talk a little bit about how you came to come to? You could talk about Dublin as well. But.
Yeah. I've kind of talked about this so often.
I know.
It's like playing the same role, but I'm happy
New
to
audience.
do so. New audience.
New audience.
My father was a Muslim when he married my mother, who was a Christian. And in the community, in the spaces we lived in northern Nigeria, there was an expectation he'd force my mother to convert, but he didn't do so. Neither did my mother care. They just loved each other, and we were born. But when he traveled to Mecca for the pilgrimage, he saw some things that didn't quite sit right with him, and when he returned to Nigeria, said he was reconsidering his faith, and where we lived, that wasn't really an acceptable thing. And to point to how unacceptable it was, years later, Boko Haram came about. And since the end of independence and how Nigeria was carved up as a country, there'd always been clashes between Christians and Muslims. And it was to do with religion, but really to do with capitalism and land, which are, the hoops through which are the reasons why the British came in the first place. So the ways in which they carved up the country only deepened those fractures, which is why Boko Haram is still this force right now, which extremism is still rising in the north, and why those 264 girls were kidnapped from Chibok. So yeah, and around 1995, 1996, that wasn't accepted, and essentially the Boko Haram didn't exist at the time, but the sentiments were still there, and they just made life very difficult for us, for my family. And we fled to Lagos, and we don't know if they tracked us, but some of the violence we were trying to escape followed us. And then my uncle owned Nigeria's first independent television station, and he was looking for someone to build relationships between his company and the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC. So my father came to do that job. So we came as workers pretty much, but the real reason why we left is because of all of that madness.
Yeah, that's super heavy. Sorry, I never personally tire of hearing no, because it really does gives more weight to how you got where
there's so many different reasons why people leave home. Sometimes the gun to your head is crippling poverty. Sometimes it's an ailment. Sometimes it's your own sexuality. Sometimes it's your gender preference, and the people around you make it impossible for you to be yourself, and you just have to leave. And the British did such a great job of, one, colonizing half the world, and two, painting Britain as the motherland. That is no wonder that the children of the Commonwealth would come to the motherland to seek refuge. And watching nationalism and nativism rise over the last year has been counterintuitive to the image Britain projects of itself. And those two things can't be true. You know.
Yeah, my eyes are constantly. Every time I think I know what the UK is about, yeah. I shouldn't be surprised by that, but I constantly am surprised, and not pleasantly either. So, but yeah.
What's still startling is I don't know why this is happening. Is it simply because of money? Does Britain think it's not wealthy enough to look after the people it mothered?
Yeah.
Is it fear of this country being eroded by people? I
think fear is at the root of everything. Yeah, I mean, the basis, there's no real evidence for that fear, but I think that's pretty much, and that feeds into the economic part of it. But people are just scared of the unknown, I guess. And this loss of culture, you're talking about the Commonwealth, the culture, that is the culture. As especially if you've grown up in a country that's part of the Commonwealth, that is what you assume that Britain is about. That is how they built this great nation. It's it's hard not to be disheartened by it, but we have to have hope.
Sometimes I have to try and divorce emotion from it in order to think clinically and clearly, because it's one thing. I mean, once you give yourself into it, there's no other emotion than to be disheartened. But I'm trying to deconstruct it to understand it from a distance, and it's still baffling.
Yeah, I promise you, I've tried to do the same thing. I really have, especially when Brexit happened, or not when it happened, but when it was on the table. It was hard, but I really tried to divorce myself from the emotions and what I think and my echo chamber thinks, but I tried to speak to certain people from places that are not as affluent as London, because I get the idea of scarcity, but even with some of those conversations, I couldn't really get to the bottom, because then you're trying not to patronize and you're trying to just listen. And it's hard to do, I think, when you're from London as well, because there is definitely a perception, and I understand that perception, actually. And London is one of the richest cities. It just is.
It just is, yeah.
But even through conversation, and to the point where people that maybe disagreed with me completely, I found did like me as a person. It just came down. It's fear. It's you rationalize, and then they're just like, well, I just don't like it. I don't like people coming in. I feel threatened. I'm scared that there's a lot. There's not enough money. Scarcity. There's too many people. Scarcity. There's a loss of culture. And when I try to work out what it is that you are missing, because we have freedom here, as much as we have freedom, as much as free, but you're free to practice your religion, your cultures, and so I did struggle to work out what is this missing culture that.
I was reading an article today which I didn't quite finish, and the journalist was making parallels between the UK and the US, and he talked about the differences between liberalism and conservatism. And he said in America, the fault lines and the gap is couched on marital sort of relationships and the age divide. And he said something really interesting. He said that most white women, specifically who are married, are intensely conservative, whereas those who are liberal tend to be single and tend to be in the urban areas. And London has probably the most amount of single people and unmarried people. Which means that we're more given to individual liberty, which means that we are all prone to vote Labour. But once you're married and you have kids, and the ways in which gender intersects with marriage culture and capitalism, suddenly the woman is at home with the kids. and all of those traditional values begin to take root in ways that even those now married people would be would be horrified when they were younger, to think, oh my God, I'm not going to grow up to that person. And suddenly then they begin to have conservative leanings and want to protect their children from the complications of the world, which is why they don't want to change the educational institutions. They don't want to reflect and teach critical race theory because they think it's just going to freak their kids out. They just want to create this bubble. Yeah. And so that kind of makes sense, but...
That really does make sense.
Yeah.
But it's also...
Yeah, it's still frightening because those kids are being protected from all the possible people they could become, and they're just gonna become versions of their parents, which is diminishing their individual freedoms. And also it's to do with fear also. What are they afraid that the children will become? Their wildest dreams grow beyond them, I don't know, but how do you crack that nut? How do you...
I do have hope for the younger generation, I have to say, even with parents who are... A lot of people I know whose parents are very conservative, and nothing against people who have conservative... Yeah. I'm sure that I have some conservative leanings. I don't know what they are, but I'm sure they exist. But I found that most parents of those children, the children are thinking differently and critically, and that, as much as we hate social media,
is definitely helping.
That's helping, and the internet in general, definitely helping. Again, that's only in London. I don't know what it's like. I wonder what it is like for a young person who grows up in like a smaller town in the UK, in the countryside, like Gloucester. I'm sure those children will probably be similar to their parents.
Yeah, I think they're confused and understand their confusion.
I have empathy, and I think it's important to have empathy with people who don't necessarily think the same as you, and I have empathy for the younger ones, less so for the adults who have access to the internet and can read and write. But I do have empathy, but I also have hope for the younger generation as well, and that is mainly because of the internet. It's not because their parents are doing a great...
The frightening thing is how the internet is being weaponized.
Well, this is it, because then it's also being used to...
The interesting is when the internet was first developed by, I think it was a British computer scientist who invented the World Wide Web. His name is... I don't know, it's written somewhere.
On the internet.
On the internet, he thought that it was going to be like the new dawn for humanity, this completely liberal space, and for the first maybe 10-15 years that it existed, it was that. But once as capitalism came in, once a company like Google came and began to rank search listings, it meant that they could steer people's understandings and beliefs about the world. I watched this have you watched, is a documentary called The Social Network, The Social Dilemma.
It's on Netflix. I feel like it sounds really, I feel like I don't need to.
There's one thing they said which freaked me out the most. They said if you type in the question, climate change is... The completion of the answer might be real, but it is specific to where you are in the world. So if you're in a community of people who are climate change deniers, that is what it will say, climate change is fake. So there is no truth. Which is why the internet might be the worst place for people trying to form an opinion right now.
That is very true.
So I don't know. This is all kind of fear mongering, but it's something to be aware of about. We live in a post-truth world now, which is a scary place for young people growing up trying to figure out who they should be.
No, I know, and that's why I try. I have to question my own beliefs. As lovely and liberal and left-leaning as they seem, I have to constantly be like, is this right though?
Is this right?
Which is why I say, maybe I do have conservative leanings, because I can't. Nothing feels absolute. Everything.
I'm a heterosexual, straight Nigerian man. I definitely have conservative leanings.
Again, true that. No, it's true.
Silence them.
Yeah. I actually would like to talk about the kind of fun cultural differences. They can be big or small. I want you to talk a little bit about Ireland as well in this, because I don't know much about Dublin really.
Yeah.
Have I been to Dublin? I have been to Dublin, but briefly.
Okay.
And yeah, I just want to talk about cultural differences from
Okay.
growing up in Nigeria.
Okay. See if I can remember any. Wow. So in 1999, we moved to Dublin, and went to we lived in Tallaght, near this huge, it's a Tallaght, Tallaght.
That's so Irish.
That's so Irish. And we lived near a shopping center called the Square. And when I started schooling, there was the only black boy in the only school. The other black students were my sisters. And and Ireland didn't know much about, was just slowly beginning to awaken to its position in the world and to multiculturalism, because there were a whole bunch of people kind of streaming in. But my school was largely ignorant. It was in the suburbs, and they thought that Africans could not read. Mm-hmm. And I remember they were reading
the whole continent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They were reading Catcher in the Rye, and my classmates, the most articulate ones, most of them were just stuttering through the reading. So I raised my hand offering if I could read, and the whole class just started laughing at me. Even my English teacher, because so once my teacher realized that I could read and I loved reading, everything kind of changed. I became like the teacher's pet. She'd always calling me to read. And my poetry teacher in my second year was also the basketball coach. And he discovered that I didn't need him to translate Shakespeare for me, which sort of, kind of elevated me in his eyes. But it got to the point where I was, in some classes, a co-tutor. Like Inua explained to the class what's happening here. And I really loved Dublin, because it really put me in the stark position. There were no other molds of black or African identity that I could slip into, because the school didn't know any. Yeah. They were just the big ones digested from African American culture, which the basketball team and most of the school only knew from MTV and hip hop videos and blah, blah, blah. And there was a safety net in trying to slip into those stereotypes. But I remember just going home one night frustrated, and I sat in my bedroom with a mirror and I was studying my own face. I was asking myself, who do you want to be, Inua? Do you want to be who they think you are, who they expect you to be, or
how old were you?
16.
Was everyone else doing this deep self-analysis? I'm not doing that now. Okay, but continue.
I think was that saying necessity is the mother of invention. I had no choice if I didn't do that.
Okay.
Yeah. But I just decided resolutely just to be yourself at all, come what may. What's the worst that could happen? That's what I did. I went home. I went back to school the other day and just gave myself into this arts sort of like obsessed freak that I was, and began to spend most of my time in the art room just painting and drawing everything. I began to design clothes and just just to fool around with a natural artistic flair, which is expressed in clothing. Then I developed it into a business. I was designing clothes for a whole bunch of people in the school. I was getting commissions left, right, and center. And in my final year, I became vice president of the student council. So in 3 years, I'd gone from being the runt of the school group to being one of its leaders, which is awesome.
Can't write, awesome. But from can't write to vice president, I mean.
Yeah, it was, and I think a lot of what I practice now as an artist, just that idea of self-belief, of like curiosity, came from those 3 difficult years in Ireland. And there were some really horrible things that happened, like just the sheer racism from cycling home and people shoulder charging me on my bike, so I'd fall over in the street with oncoming traffic. Things like my sisters being bullied. I'd be walking through shopping malls and I'd be attacked with mustard, people squirting it down my jackets. Just fights, squabbles, people asking my twin sister if she got her period like normal people, and she, all kinds of stuff happened. But there were also moments of just complete joy and tenderness. And I'm still in WhatsApp group with some of those boys that I went to school with to this day. We still share. They're all married and have kids, and just typical Irish boys. And some of their humor still is as it was 20 years ago.
The crack.
The crack. Yeah, even like the sort of strange ass racist jokes that they make, and I'm not aware if it's racist, and have to be like, guys. But
did they talk about those times? Did they recognize that they treated you perhaps?
So one of them, who I considered the most racist of the group, started this huge conversation after George Floyd died in our WhatsApp group. And I just, my respect for him just elevated,
That's growth.
Yeah. And the thing is, when the conservative, and he now lives here, he lives in like one of the small towns or something, so not in London. But when Brexit happened, I did the same thing you did, where I was trying to, I remember asking my Facebook group, who voted Brexit, who voted for this conservative government. I just wanted to know
hard.
why. Yeah.
No one wanted to come out.
So he responded, I said, yeah, I voted Brexit. I said, okay, why? And he began to give me all that rhetoric, immigrants, we have to, my children, university. And I said, well, it was the Conservatives who brought school fees in. Like the Labour voted against that. And you're an immigrant, you're Irish. Have you forgotten the relationship with Conservative government, Yeah. And then maybe 3 years after everything began to, hit the fan under Cameron, then under Theresa May, then under, Boris, he kind of private messaged me saying, actually, Inua, everything you said has come to happen.
But that just gets on my nerves.
Yeah. So in the same thing, when he began talking about George Floyd and racism, I was so surprised, and he just started that conversation. So I think it shifted some things in the group. They're just more careful about what they say, but yeah, we shouldn't have to do that work.
Yeah, we really shouldn't. And it's good that I don't know if he did work or as much as just saw the outcome of voting for such a thing. But yeah, you're right, we shouldn't. And I wanted to ask you, we've probably had this conversation before, but the idea of being the acceptable face of blackness is something that I'd say struggled with rather than, I think in the beginning, when I say in the beginning, in my teenage years, I didn't really know fully what racism was, other than being called the N-word, and I didn't really understand about, constructs and how government policy affects race and all these things I didn't understand. So I was very much like, I'm just me. I'm gonna get somewhere because I'm me and I'm fat, and it's not that I forgot I was black, because I'm constantly reminded, but there were times when I was like, everything's fine. You just need to work hard, and I wonder, and that's part of that is because of being seen as like acceptable, and that's we could. There are many different reasons why people are accepted, and it's not always to do with class, but in the circles that I was mixing in, it was to do with that. So it's how you speak, how well you're educated, and also your chosen profession and things like that. And so I wonder if that's something that, I'm sure we've talked about it, but that you've experienced and how that makes you feel.
Definitely. Essentially, we're talking about our own privileges within our blackness and how aware we are of them. And it took me, I think I really got wind of that maybe 3 years ago. I was performing the show I have called An Evening with an Immigrant in Italy, tiny art gallery. And a lady who does work with immigrant communities there came to the show. She was British. I think she spent a lot of her time here, but went back to Italy to help immigrants. So very well woman, very liberal, very intelligent, very cultured. And she came to the show, and after the work, she said, "Can I talk to you?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Who's your show helping?" And I said, and she brought a whole bunch of young black immigrants who were, English wasn't their first language. They were struggling with their Italian identities. And I said, I don't know. I think I'm just trying to help those who can. And she said, these men, do you think you're inspiring them, these black men? And I said, I don't know. I'm not really trying to. And she said, I don't think you are, because everything you've attained is beyond them. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, just look at how you speak. So one, you're very articulate. 2, you're educated. 3, you had a very safe family net who were able to create a safe space for you to be yourself. 4, you're sort of relatively good looking, all of these things.
Claim it.
Yeah, claim it. All of these things mean that you can go into certain spaces that these men will never attain.
Yeah.
And I was not aware of all of those things. And it really knocked me because I thought, fuck. But she was absolutely right. Yeah. So when I think about the show now, I think the show is most effective when I perform it to white, middle class, liberal or conservative audiences who just
and I've been in those audiences of your reading. What wonderful, like genuinely. And and that's something that I've thought of as well. Yeah. And that happens a lot when I go to theatre in general. I'm normally one of 3 other black people, if that. That's it's a big deal. And
it was a big deal because it knocked me. I didn't want to perform the show for months after. I thought, what am I doing? But then you just have to operate. You have to realize the spaces in which you operate, who you are in those spaces, and how to use those spaces and who you are to open the doors for those who are coming behind you. You just have to be aware of your privilege.
100%. And I think that's why it annoys me so much when people don't recognise their privilege in general as well, because I really do. As much as, and we've got very different backgrounds, because obviously not all black and African people are the same. I guess in London I did grow up relatively poor, accounts to say single mother. I hate reading this off of statistics, but it's just so I don't have to get into my entire life story. But my sister went to boarding school in Ghana, speaks a certain way. I copy her. I get told off for speaking slang. And so that informs the way that I carry myself. And then it's the code switching is something that just becomes survival. So I'm like, I'm trying to get into this school, I'm trying to do this subject, I need to dress like this and speak like this and act like this. But I recognise that's a privilege to even recognise that. It blows my mind when people, particularly people who aren't immigrants or who aren't of colour, who are like, I was poor so I'm not privileged or whatever, and they can't recognise just bits of privilege, whether it's 2 parents or a healthy parent or
not being disabled,
able-bodied, or whatever it is. And so I really struggle with people that just find it so hard to recognise that, because I think it's important that every single person recognises, not as a badge of honour, but just if you recognise that, I think you're able to have more empathy for other people. But I also think that being black but also Inua and also Bridgette, it's really important to be yourself as well. And I'm not, when I had the revelation maybe a bit earlier than you, earlier than 3 years ago, and I remember being like, then I shouldn't speak like this, I shouldn't dress like this. It was a lot of black people who told me about myself as well, and I went for a period of just completely being confused about who I was. And I was like, okay, maybe, and it was the whole weave gate and but those things are important as well to recognise in yourself. Okay, well, where am I trying to fit into Western culture, and where does that end, and where does Bridgette begin? And it was a real journey of discovery. And the biggest thing I've discovered is it's so important to be yourself, no matter what, as much as you can. However, I think, again, having the privilege to be able to code switch and to know how to, there's capitalism too. And,
one of the things that really tripped me up is grown with my deepened appreciation of hip hop and grime culture, which I don't even listen to grime, but I know why it exists and how it's manifest, is because my artistic identities and sensibilities are couched in being a poet, which means that when I first started writing around 2003, I'd find myself before a room full of people who clapped when I shared personal things about myself, which were really emotionally fraught. And the more emotional and more vulnerable I was, the louder they clapped. And lots of black men just do not exist in those spaces. So part of my privilege comes from how connected I am to my emotion, which just black men just don't have. So that was a whole other thing, and that tripped me up. So even now, when I'm walking down the road and I see the way black men have to walk with the toughest skin, I know the reason why I don't have those airs is because I spent, the first decade of my adult life completely being incubated where I could just be emotional. And a lot of black men, that's the complete opposite of so that also really tripped me up.
But like you said, we stand on the shoulders of, and it is important to be, that's why it's so important to be yourself, because you never know who you might impact, and we don't do things to impact necessarily, but by being ourselves, we undoubtedly we will. And I think reading, I'm so passionate about reading, and hearing you talk about your childhood, it so mirrors mine, which is why I don't think economics shouldn't be a barrier. And I've actually started volunteering at this charity called Bookmark, which tries to get certain kids in school up to a level and get them enjoying reading. It doesn't have to be whatever it is they're interested in, because that's like one of the biggest barriers to getting a job or whatever it is, and language is important, and
it's so important.
But we don't all have. You had nurturing parents, and who really nurtured your love of reading, but not everybody does. And I think reading, like taking some kind of joy in reading, can really level the playing field a bit more than actually other things. I think for me, reading is probably, I don't know if that's biased, but it's the foundation, I think.
It definitely is. It stretches your imagination. It teaches you how to think about thinking, like and
how to form opinions. And it has to start. It doesn't have to start young, but it would be ideal. Because I'm just really interested in fun cultural differences.
Okay.
I don't know why. Because I'm learning more about Nigerian now. I'm slightly obsessed. I love Uganda, but I do feel like Nigeria has.
I'm trying to think of cultural differences that exist.
Like I've got prompts here. So discipline, raising children.
Yes.
Education.
So one of the main disciplines in Nigeria and boarding school, and actually most schools in Nigeria, is that teachers can still cane the students with whips, belts, sticks, blah 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 blah, and that was a proper deterrent, for being a bad kid. When I came here, punishment was detention. The thing is, I really liked my teachers, so detention just meant I hung around with them on my own.
I was such a teacher.
I really was. Which is just encouragement to be a bad kid. One, I was top of my class in most of my subjects, so they couldn't fail me. I loved doing my homework. So I was cheeky in the classroom, but telling me that punishment was just us hanging out together it was not punishment. I thought, yes, I'll stand at my table. One of the most devastating punishments I was doled in Nigeria. I love it because of its Machiavellian genius. So one prep night, me and my boys weren't reading in Nigeria. We're just like talking. So the teacher, his name is Monsieur Batcock. He was the French teacher. That was the actual name. He'd get us to stand in front of the classroom in one line. And you have to slap the person beside you on the face as hard as you can. Otherwise, Monsieur Batcock would whip you with a stick.
Oh!
So it'd go all the way down the line. All the way down the line. Pop, pop, pop. You're slapping your boy slapping the person. Then all the way back up. So the friend you slapped would get to slap you back.
Oh.
And we do this like 2 or 3 times down. So at the end, your cheeks are hurting, your face is ringing, and you hate all your boys. So there's complete silence in the classroom following it. So it's brilliant. It's genius. It's so. And here we just didn't have proper punishments. So when I came to England, it was like, what is this? Detention? What? That was nothing.
That is a real make you think, 'cause you're like, if I do it small, then he'll do it like that to me. But then you can't.
But
if
you don't do hard enough, the teacher will whip you.
Oh yeah.
So you have to put your elbow in.
That's a real. That's a wow.
Yeah. So discipline was a big thing.
But were you disciplined? Obviously, say if you don't physically at home by your parents.
Once, a few times. I think when I got to maybe when I was 11, my parents stopped because we just but yeah, I was beaten a few times by my
That's relatively young. I'm
That's
just
relatively
thinking, my mum would still no, she doesn't. Let's get on to something fun. So, food.
Yeah.
What are your favourite Nigerian dishes, if any?
They're the staples, jollof rice, which is great.
Ghanaian, so just for those who don't.
Well,
it's superior. Nigerians have it, but
you guys just firstly don't make it correctly. Secondly, you claim something that we pioneered.
No, actually, Sierra Leone we built upon, made it better. You came in with an inferior.
We improved.
Rice, but it's cute.
Jollof 3.0. We improved. The Sierra Leone started it. You guys did whatever you can.
Made it better, enhanced.
Used the wrong kind of rice anyway.
No, that would be what you did. But yeah, what you've done is super cute.
Jollof,
super cute.
Suya from Nigeria.
You can
just
claim that.
Really spicy meat. Fura danunu, which is this drink made in the north with milk and rice. Oh, it's lovely. Let me see. Plantains. I think we
can share that one. We can, and it's not plantain for those West Indian.
Yes. No. There's something I appreciate from you guys though.
Oh.
Red and shito.
Yeah.
You guys,
me too.
as a contribution to humanity, I accept that and champion. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. What about you guys? Favorite Ghanaian dishes?
Red is up there for me. I only learned how to make it like a few years ago, which is a shame. I just love boiled yam and then with this nice stew, either red or any fish stew. I love, and I never used to appreciate fufu. Do you know what fufu is?
Yes, yeah.
I never appreciated that at all as a kid. I thought it was so weird that you don't chew.
Yeah, you just swallow things.
And I never knew how to do. You got to like
dip it in the soup.
Cut it's like you got to use your fingers like pincers. Like it's really. But now I love it, and I've missed out as a kid. The thing is,
so when I speak to how weird I was as a kid, all traditional Nigerian food you're supposed to eat with your hand.
Yeah.
Well, my father brought chopsticks back from his travels, and I became obsessed with them. So between the ages of maybe 10 and 12, I would eat everything with chopsticks.
Jollof with chopsticks?
In Nigeria, yeah. Jollof, plant, fufu, everything with chopsticks.
Fufu with chopsticks? How?
I wonder that because now I can't do it.
I'm actually trying to imagine it.
You just have to cut it. You cut it with the chopsticks.
Do you know what? That's actually a vibe because that can be a bit... I'm actually going to try that. Watch me bring it to my mum and my mum just get the chopstick and lick it around my head. But I actually can see how that could work for fufu actually. Not yam. Yam's too hard.
Well, you'd have to cut it into small pieces. And then have to use
the
a knife and a chopstick. It's pointless. Yeah.
So extra.
Yeah.
So international. Was it who in your household used to do most of the cooking?
My mother, definitely. And when we were kids, my mother expected my sisters to do most of it, but I always strayed into the kitchen and just kind of taught myself. Yeah, I think my little sister still doesn't think I can cook. So when she came round just after lockdown, once she said, "Oh, so it's just been you here all this time cooking for yourself," and I said, "I'm a grown-ass man, of course." Yeah, she was like, and then I made something for her. And she said, "Oh my God, this is really good." And I said, "Do you think I've been ordering food from, Deliveroo for the last 6 months or something?" So yeah, I started cooking a lot when we were in Ireland and just,
Okay, and mainly like Nigeria, West Africa.
No, I can barely. It's like jollof rice I can cook, stew I can cook with okra, eba I can cook, but the more intricate soups, that's still beyond me. My mother has to teach me.
Yeah. To be honest, you can definitely cook more. At least West African food. Yeah, I'm not. It's a shame. No, it's embarrassing. It's a shame. I'm on Google instead of like having recipes, down from family. I'm like Googling how to do jollof rice. It's really embarrassing to be honest, but this is what happens when you're born here. And actually, I don't know if we could do this at the end, but is there a recipe that you could share that you have perfected?
Is there a recipe?
Or is there any? Do you have a twist on any Nigerian foods that we can include? We'll like shove it on in the end, sort of.
No.
Is it quite safe?
I sort of don't really have recipes in my head. What I do is I start cooking and I just adapt things here and there as I go. Even when I follow recipes, I just use what I have in my cupboard.
And taste it, right?
And
taste it, people. Season and tasting.
Taste
it.
Taste
Don't just
your
go,
way through it.
It looks okay. I'll just taste your food. That's if there's any takeaway from this, it's to taste your food and season well. What did you, when you obviously you moved over for very, not the nicest of reasons.
Yeah.
So did you individually and then as a family envision yourselves staying in London for indefinitely, or did you have like a plan?
At the time, no. We just needed to get out and settle, and my father figured out some way of earning money, and the company ran into problems immediately. So my father became a pizza delivery boy. My mother became a cleaner. We carried on going to school, but we very immediately ran into difficulties. And my father applied for extensions to his visa, knowing that he at some point he'd be able to get things settled. But life just got more and more difficult. So we knew we couldn't go back to Nigeria.
Yeah.
We didn't know where to settle just yet. And what happened was our immigration case just became extremely, extremely complicated, with our immigration lawyers being raided and shut down by the Home Office for malpractice, paperwork getting missing in the post, successive governments changing the rules surrounding immigration and the asylum process, which made life very difficult. So there were complications beyond our power, which prolonged our immigration case, which still goes on to this day. So we left in 1996 and it's still happening.
So, but as of this currently, you have a British passport?
No, I have indefinite leave to remain, as my father does. My two sisters do because they're married to British citizens. And my mother has a British passport, but my father, myself, and my older sister don't have one yet.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wild. I'm glad you've got indefinite leave to remain, but that's still, is that like a thing that hangs over you, just having, do you want a British passport anyway? It's rubbish here, no joking.
Well, I mean, and after Brexit, it'll become even more rubbish. I think for the ease of travel, because of just how much work I do with the British Council across the world, it makes sense to do so. Having to apply for visas so much, sometimes the cost of applying for a visa is more expensive than the ticket for the, so all of those things, it would be good to have a British passport. But beyond that, I don't know. There's certain things that I can't do. I never want to be famous. I want to be notorious. And I think I may have to, seduce Prince William or something like that in order to become super notorious. So there's certain things, there's certain expressions of my identity which I can't do because there may be repercussions from an immigration case.
Yeah, I didn't think of that, but
yeah, it's really frustrating, and I can't leave the country for longer than 30, maybe 60 days or something like that, because then it impacts me. So there are whole things that have been offered, residencies at universities right across the world, arts residencies at world class, which I just can't take. So it inhibits me professionally. And that's the frustrating thing.
Yeah, fair. I was actually going to ask you as well, do you feel British, whatever that means to you? No.
Definitely not.
Do you think you would if you had a passport?
No, I don't think lots of British people
no, I don't feel
British. Yeah. Even white British people, they feel more European or like Londoners than they feel English or British.
But now that we've got Brexit, everyone who's from here will feel really English and British. We've got that to look forward to. You have mentioned literature and access to American, UK films. These don't have to be American or UK films, but because we love all things film here, what are your top 5 favourite films?
Oh my god.
And I knew that I was going to text you, and then I was like, I don't want him to think about it. I want you to just...
Oh, wow. Oh boy.
Sorry.
Contact.
Oh.
Yeah, with Jane Jane Fonda, Jodie Foster even, Jodie Foster, Matthew McConaughey. Um,
When did you first see Contact?
Oh,
When did you
God.
first make contact with Contact?
Years and years ago.
Why does it resonate? Why do you like it?
Because it's about belief,
Oh.
both from a scientific point of view, but a religious point of view. It's sci-fi, but it's about belief in the afterlife. This woman is trying to reconcile her relationship with her father, who is deceased. It was beautiful. And at the end, she holds and
Spoiler.
I'll never forget it. Is it okay? It doesn't give the story away,
Okay.
but she holds a handful of sand, and in it she sees like a constellation, and she explains to the young people around her just how vast the universe is. And she says, if human beings are the only things alive, it's an incredible waste of space, don't you think? And then Matthew McConaughey. Okay, I can't say that. Yeah, but I loved that movie. Oh, I want to watch it again. Netflix need to have it.
You've definitely sold it. I haven't seen it.
Oh my god.
No, I'm not.
Hands down, one of my favorite
that's
films.
a good description. Sounds hopeful.
What else? Got this. This movie just came out 2 years ago. It's called Supermodo.
Ooh.
Supamodo. It's about a young girl with a terminal illness, who's obsessed with superheroes. It was made by Kenyans. One of the writers is a friend of mine, and I've never cried so much in the cinema. It's beautifully made. Supermodo.
That's down. Going on my list. Okay.
Hands down. There's so many.
I know. I'm like three. If you could do one more.
One more. Memento.
Okay.
Christopher Nolan's first film, I think. Just the way it plays with time. It's the film feels like a poem because its structure is wedded to its subject matter. It's like riding a bicycle. You have to move in order to be balanced, and you have to balance in order to move. The film is like that. Without the structure, the narrative doesn't make sense. It keeps imploding and surprising you at every turn. And Christopher Nolan always plays with time in his films, even in the most recent one, which is called Tenet. But all the seeds of his work as a filmmaker can be found in Memento. Flawless film.
Amazing.
Flawless.
I think they're pretty good suggestions. I did want to ask you as well. I know you wouldn't do this, but I think sometimes people are like, I need to think of something really profound.
Yeah.
It's just like, it could be, I don't know.
Yeah.
Daffy Duck. I don't know. That's how I feel. I think Pan's Labyrinth is probably one of mine. I think that is just perfection.
Yeah.
Okay, this is going to be our last question.
Okay.
And it's a simple, but also not so simple. What does home mean to you?
What does home mean to me? I don't know. I think it's probably just to do with a sense of self-ownership, a sense of completion, more so than a geographic location or anything like that. I think when you feel you're in complete equilibrium with the world, with your space, with the journey you're on, and the continuum of that journey, I think and you feel balanced. I think that is home. I think anything else is an illusion, and is to believe in a safety net, which can be shredded at any time by any number of things. A pandemic, a needle in the wrong place in your body, a car turning a sharp corner, a bird, any number of things. Yeah, so I think that's it. Just yourself, really.
Well, for someone who said he didn't know, I think that's the most profound answer we could have asked for. Thank you so much.